The topic for today is area and circumference of circles. Where we're going to start is with two very important formulas. These formulas should either be recorded probably in your notebook, or if you have this piece of paper in front of you, you can write them down here. But to do this section, we need to know the formulas for the area of a circle and the circumference of a circle. You also probably need to keep in mind that we have this special number called pi. And pi is a button in your calculator. It's actually a decimal, and it has to do with circles, and we're always going to be using pi when we're doing area and circumference of circles. Just remember that that is 3.14, and most of your scientific calculators should have a pi button as well. But those are actually, the pi is part of both of our formulas for area and circumference. For area, what I'm going to write is area equals pi r squared. And remember that r means radius, and we'll get down to that in the vocabulary section. And the circumference of a circle is kind of a similar formula, but it's 2 pi r. Okay, so those are your two very important formulas that you're going to need to have in front of you while you're learning how to do these circle problems. So we go down to our important vocabulary section, and you've probably heard the word radius and diameter before, but we want to draw a picture of what they mean, so that when we come to picture problems in our homework and in our quizzes and tests, you'll recognize them right away. The radius goes from the center to the outside of the circle. So let's draw that in and let's label it on our picture. And if you recall, a diameter goes through the center of the circle, and it goes from one side to the other, all the way through. That is what is called a diameter. Now we're going to go down to our area of circles section, and I'm actually going to have you write your answers in two different ways. I'm going to have you find an exact answer, which means your answer will have the pi in it, and I'm going to have you use your calculators and round your answers to the nearest tenth. So that's going to be what we're going to do first, is the exact answers, and then we'll type them into the calculator and do a rounded answer as well. Okay, so we're going to do 3 practice problems. Let's see, the very first set of directions are saying find area, and you have a formula for the area of a circle. See if you can remember it without looking. It is pi r squared. And the way I like to do these problems is I always start, so that I don't forget what I'm trying to find, by writing the formula first. And then what I'm going to do is just plug in the numbers, because it's always good to have really clear work so that your teacher can give you as much credit as your teacher can. And you'll be less likely to make a mistake if you write the formula first, and then plug the numbers in, and then go to the calculator. So my area is going to be pi times, I'm going to plug in 4 for the radius, because up here I have a radius. It's starting at the center of the circle and it's going to the outside. So that's my r in my formula. That's what radius is. And what I'm going to do is square the 4, which is 16. If you remember your order of operations, you always have to square the numbers before you multiply. So my exact answer is just going to be 16 pi, and we don't know what the units are, so I'm just going to use units squared. That's my exact answer. And once you have your exact answer, it's very easy to also get the decimal equivalent. So all you need to do in your calculator is type 16 times 3.14, and it's 50.24, which is going to round to 50.2 units squared. So those are my two answers. The first one is an exact answer because it has pi in it, and the second one, I went to my calculator and I did 16 times pi. And if you have one of those fancy calculators that has the pi button, it's just going to give you a lot more decimals. But the directions in this section want us to round to the nearest tenth, which just means 1 decimal place. Okay, let's try the second one. I'm going to start with my formula, area equals pi times r squared. I'm going to plug in the 7 for my radius, because again, the 7, it starts in the middle and it goes to the outside. That's my radius. Plug in 7. And now I'm going to square the 7, because you always want to do exponents first before you multiply. And that's actually what my exact answer is. My exact answer is 49 pi units squared. And now if your teacher wants you to round to the nearest tenth, you're going to go to your calculator and you're going to type 49 times 3.14. And that answer is 153.9. So some textbooks keep their answers having pi in them, like this 49 pi and like this 16 pi, and some textbooks will multiply pi and have a decimal. So you'll just have to ask your teacher what form they want your answers in, but it's very easy to go back and forth, so you should know how to give them whichever form they want. Okay, look at example number 3 and see if you can see if there's anything different between example 3 and 1 and 2 that we just did. Can you see it? What we have here is the diameter. See how the line goes from one side of the circle all the way to the other side? Well, our formula still has radius in it. I don't have anything with a diameter in my formula. I still have pi times r squared for the area. So what I need to do is take this 20 and somehow figure out what the radius is supposed to be. And if you know that the radius starts right in the middle, all you have to do is cut that diameter in half. Doesn't that mean that each side is going to be 10 and 10? So this means that my radius is 10. And you do have to beware of problems like that because the textbooks and stuff, they really like to put in a diameter just to see who's paying attention, and make sure you don't use the diameter in your formula because the formula has to have a radius in it. So sometimes you might need to do a little thinking if you're given the diameter to figure out what the radius is before you can use your formula. So I'm going to use the 10 since that's my radius into my formula. I am going to square 10, which means 100. And that means that my exact answer is 100 pi units squared. And I think it's actually easier to leave your answer in terms of pi because that means that you don't have to have the calculator with you to do that decimal for you. But if you wanted to do the 100 times the 3.14 in your calculator, you get 314 units squared. And that is your decimal equivalent using the 3.14 in your calculator. So that is area, and if you notice, I started by writing my formula every single time before I plugged any numbers in. And then after I did that, I showed my teacher very clearly what I was plugging in for the R. And then I made sure and circle both my answers so that my work is really clear and easy to follow. Okay, so that's how to find area, given the radius or given the diameter. Now we're going to use that other formula to find circumference. So it's really important to make sure that you're answering the question your teacher's asking you, because if you give me the radius, or if you give me the area, excuse me, and I ask for circumference, unfortunately that answer is not right, and you might have done the area perfectly. So just beware and make sure you read the questions, and that's always why I like to start off with my formula. Remember the circumference formula up from the top? It's a little bit different than the area formula, and it's going to give us totally different answers. So if you notice number 4, 5, and 6, those are the same circles that we just did. Except now we're not finding area, we're finding circumference. And by the way, circumference means, it's kind of like the perimeter. It's a fancy word for the perimeter of a circle. It means the distance all the way around the circle. That's what the circumference means. So that's what we're going to be finding in all of these. Okay, so I'm going to start by writing my formula. And after I write my formula, what I'm going to do is plug in my radius to make sure my work is very clear. And after we do that, we can multiply the 2 and the 4 and get 8 pi. Okay, and that's actually going to be our final answer. And this is just in units because the distance around a circle is just in units. It's not in units squared. So there's my exact answer. And then to go to the calculator and do 8 times 3.14, that is 25.1 units. So it's important for you to know that every time we do two answers, the first one is the exact answer and the second one is the rounded answer. They technically mean the same thing, but some teachers prefer it in one form versus the other. So they're actually the same number because 8 times pi is the same thing as 25.1. But it's just important to know the difference and be sure to follow the directions when you're taking your quizzes and your tests. Okay, let's try the second one. I'm starting by writing my formula. Circumference equals 2 pi r. And I'm going to plug in the 7 this time for my radius, just like we did for the area formula. And you can multiply the 2 and the 7. So you get circumference equals 14 pi. And that's going to be our exact answer. And then to round your answer to the nearest tenth, you go to your calculator and type 14 times 3.14. In this case, I got 43.96, which is going to round up to about 44 units. So there's our exact answer and there's our rounded answer. And remember, don't fall for the trick on number 6. For the trick on number 6, they gave us the diameter again, and remember the circumference formula has radius in it. So again, anytime they give you the diameter, they're trying to see who's paying attention and who's going to fall for the trick. You need to figure out what the radius is yourself. And remember, the radius starts in the middle and goes to the outside. And that's always half of the diameter. So half of 20 is just 10. Same picture that we did earlier. So start with the formula. Circumference equals 2 pi r. Plug in the 10 for the radius. And now what you can do is multiply the 2 and the 10 and get 20. And that's our exact answer, 20 pi. That is leaving your answer in terms of pi. And then you can go to the calculator and do 20 times 3.14 and get 62.8 units. So it's your job to kind of talk to your teacher and figure out the way that he or she might want you to write your answer. And it's also really important to know that these answers all mean the same thing. Just one of them has a pi in it and one of them has been multiplied by pi in the calculator and rounded. Okay, our second and last section of this topic, I guess, is application of area.